Welcome to the Pinelander Podcast, the official podcast of Pineland, broadcasting to you from an undisclosed location deep inside Pineland, where we discuss faith, family, finances, firearms, freedom, food, and everything else in between, with those who believe in living free and living out the values that made this country free. Welcome to the Pinelander Podcast. This is Paul LaFavor, and you're listening to the podcast for America's Warriors. I'm here with my Ranger buddy, Mike Blackburn. He's back from an assignment to Africa, and today is Saturday, the 20th of July, 2024. It's good to have you back, Mike.
Man, it is good to be back. It really is. I'd have to listen to you instead of be able to participate with you on these podcasts, so it's just good to be back behind the microphone.
Yeah. I mean, get back in this time zone. A lot of things have been going on since you've been gone.
Yeah, it's a crazy world. I mean, it's just, you can, if you miss like a day of news, I mean, really, I mean, you miss a day of news and you're like, whoa, holy smoke, what's going on?
Yeah, these are strange times. In this episode, we want to tackle what we're entitling Providence, God's Intervention, and the Attempted Assassination of Donald Trump. And unless you lived under a rock for the last week, at a rally in Butler, Pennsylvania, we all watched the attempted assassination of the 45th president, Donald Trump. Some people saw a miracle, others saw chance. Now, if you've so many people have gone onto social media. They've programs and they've chimed in on what how they interpret what happened. House Speaker Mike Johnson, he said that God miraculously protected Trump. Dr. Ben Carson said they tried to bankrupt him. They tried to slander him. This is so good. Yeah. They tried to imprison him. Now they have tried to kill him. But if God is protecting him, they will never succeed. I have a hearty amen for that. Oh, yeah. Crazy stuff.
Well, I just, that's really, I mean, I'm just an observer like everybody else out there. But I remember, early on, you were kind of wondering, like, who is this guy? Who is Donald Trump? And the system has relentlessly pursued him. Let's just be honest about that. I don't think any of us would have lasted long at all. When the entire system has targeted you. And I think it's, for the obvious reasons, he threatens the apple cart. But at some point or another, you're sitting there going, man, I mean, this guy, nothing sticks to this guy. Every dirty little deed that they try to, pull him into court, bankrupt him, accuse him of things. I mean, just whatever. It just doesn't matter. There's an entire army of folks that are just out to get Donald Trump. And at some point or another, you sit there and you go, this guy's got divine protection. Mm. And if you were kind of like on the fence with that, like I was, okay, because he's not like, he's not like this sort of, I don't know what you would think of as sort of a, godly individual. He's just kind of like a normal guy in many respects. He's just a normal man with flaws, like all of us. An exceptional individual for sure. I mean, he's very successful. I'm not taking any of that away, but he's kind of like an average guy, and I think that's the appeal of Donald Trump is he's kind of like just your neighbor. And so he doesn't seem like the kind of guy that would be sort of like a Samson type figure. Or a David, or any number of other personalities that you would pull out of Scripture. He just doesn't seem like he fits that sort of character.
Right.
But after a while, you sit and you're looking at him, and it's almost like hard to deny. It's like for some reason he looks like a tool of God, right? He's almost like this Jonah figure. He's been tasked to do something. I'm not even sure he has any control over it. So it's sometime or another, it almost looks like an odds thing, Paul. I mean, we talked about this. Sometimes you're kind of like you're looking at this and you're going, this is unusual. I can't mathematically. Nobody survives all of this. You know, if you take 1,000 shots at a guy, you're probably gonna get him a few times, but nothing is hitting this guy.
Yeah,
and so that's kind of, even logically, you're sitting there going, there's something going on here, and I think this topic is going to be very interesting today because I'd like to better understand this because people are asking, well, you know, why him and how does this work and why does this guy seem to be protected and have a task to do?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's clear why everyone, the establishment, the deep state, hate him because you know he's not owned, unlike these other people who are intertwined with all of their ownership and how their entire life is interwoven with people who have bought them and as their talking heads, and that's just not him. And so he's just like you don't own me, and you don't own me, and so this is just happening. And I think Trump is maybe he is coming to realize that I don't think he thinks he's some type of messiah figure.
I don't think so either.
Because there are people out there that are weird, and I think they pray to Trump. You know, there's some weird people.
No doubt.
But you know, he expressed his gratitude to the nation for our prayers, and he said he said first that it was either luck or God, but then he came back and said God alone prevented what he called the unthinkable from happening. And so I think he's coming into that consciousness of, okay, I think I'm being preserved for a reason.
I think he's like a lot of us. I think he's a lot like even me. I mean, at some point or another, you start out with saying, wow, this guy is really, really lucky, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of where you start. You go, man, this guy's lucky. How did he get out of this? How did he get out of that? I mean, why didn't this stick, you know? I remember that debate with Hillary Clinton. I mean, everyone thought he was done. You know, they had the recording of him, you know, and the locker room talk, you know, whatever, inappropriate language, you know, blah, blah, blah. And everyone really thought he was done after that. And there's been like time and time and time again where everyone thinks this guy's done.
Yeah.
And so we're kind of like beyond luck, aren't we, Paul?
Yeah, I think so. And so set the stage again here for last Saturday, right? Remember, he's in Butler, Pennsylvania, and you know, I was just kind of, everyone was probably just tooling around, and then you get this notification on social media, hey, this just happened, and of course, you know, he's shot by a guy named Thomas Crooks, a scrawny little dweeb that you probably would have pushed into his wall locker in high school. This little nobody. No offense. Sorry, I'm talking like a jock here, but that's kind of who this guy is.
No, absolutely. I think I don't know how many thousands of high schools there are in America, but every single high school in America has a Thomas Crooks.
Yeah, they're walking around, and somehow he managed. Here's the other thing: there's so many elements of this which are shocking and glaringly ridiculous. But somehow he managed to climb on top of a building that was within 200 meters of the speaking venue, and with people pointing on the roof that, hey, this guy is up there, plus that position was not taken by the counter snipers in the first place, and the building is also occupied by others and law enforcement and the FBI.
They're using the inside of the building.
Meanwhile, Dweeb is getting on top, like this little pencil-armed guy, getting on top of the building, and he's allowed. Not only that, but has a gun, and they see him for minutes on end.
Right.
So there's so many questions, like why was he allowed to live that long? Why was he allowed to gain access?
So do us a favor, Paul. Both of us have been involved in security. Okay, so in protective securities, both of us are very well educated in how this is supposed to be done and what it looks like. From that aspect, it's just embarrassing.
Yeah,
okay?
It is.
But let's go beyond that. Let's just talk about, as a sniper, as somebody, wanting to take a shot, What is that a difficult distance?
That was cake. Okay. Yeah, it was absolute cake, and that actually lends itself to the talking point that we have about Providence and this miracle, because I think it's something like 152 meters. I mean, that's with iron sights. Standing offhand, you could hit. I mean, you could just flip the gun up there real quick and probably have a good shot.
This is like pretty much anybody with any sort of military background or not, maybe, with a little bit of knowledge, could probably make this shot.
Yeah. Okay. So all of the mistakes of all the agencies working together aside, this was cake. So as we watch it, and if you see the video, Trump turns his head at a fraction of a second before the bullet arrives. He's looking at a chart, and the bullet misses his head by like millimeters. I mean, it's scary how close it is. Just the tilting of his head, and changes the flow of history, of our history and world history. Right. And so as that bullet arrives, if he hadn't have turned his head, then history would have gone a different direction. So with this, not only this election cycle, but I would say we would open up a darker chapter in our nation's history. The world would continue to look FUBAR, and it would just be amazing. And so I saw a miracle. That's what I saw. And so I want to just introduce this idea of Providence, because I mentioned that. Now we gotta deliver here. What does that mean? And I want to talk about miracle. Okay, so Providence. So I was given I was blessed to have gone to a seminary, and so I got a master's of divinity, and that just means that I know what I don't know, which is there's a lot. So it just kind of gets you your foot in the door. That's right. So I by no means am a master of anything, but the Christian doctrine of providence states that God rules over all things, directs all things, and orchestrates all things to accomplish his purposes. And so I grew up in some sense, on the shorter catechism of the Westminster Confession of Faith. And question 18, it says that God's works of providence are his most holy, wise, powerful, preserving, and governing all his creatures and their actions. I actually believe that. And so providence is the doctrine that says that nothing is left to chance. And so a sparrow can't fall to the ground apart from God's sovereign will. Even the hairs of your head, Christ says, are numbered. And even the Apostle Paul says in Ephesians 1:11 that God works all things according to the counsel of his will. And so this means that the events of our lives don't just happen. It means that an infinitely wise God providentially directs them. Now, I believe that. So God's providence, it includes not just flights of birds, but also flights of bullets. And that's kind of my point. So I want to give you this couple passages here if you want to check these out. Daniel 4:34, a famous episode in the life of the king of Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar. He lost his mind. He said, in this gross hubris moment, he just said, hey, look at all these things I built, and it's all by my doing. And he lost his mind for probably, as we understand, 7 years. And he ate grass. And he was a lunatic. At the end of it, he says this, at the end of the time, I, Nebuchadnezzar, lifted my eyes to heaven, and my understanding returned to me. And I blessed the Most High and praised and honored him who lives forever. For his dominion is an everlasting dominion, and his kingdom is from generation to generation. All the inhabitants of the earth are reputed as nothing. He does according to his will in the army of heaven and among the inhabitants of the earth. No one can restrain his hand or say to him, what have you done? There's also, you can check out these other passages, Psalm 135, verse 6. Mention Matthew 10:29, the fall of sparrows. You can also look at Acts 15:18. The Bible is full of these instances that illustrate God's providential dealings. Not everyone saw a miracle that day, though. Many rushed in to speak about things they don't understand. And in brazen terms, I heard some blasphemous words from people who don't understand what they're even saying, and they spoke without wisdom. They spoke without care. And so we need not agree with the journalist who said this. The notion of divine intervention itself raises uncomfortable questions.
Uncomfortable for them.
Yeah. Including why a just deity would allow a local former fire department leader to perish in the same attack while shielding his wife and daughter. And, of course, that absolutely did happen.
It did happen.
Yeah.
And this is a common, I would say this is a common question that people pose, is the why.
Yeah. So they look at that, and this person goes on, this brazen hussy, goes on to say, why such a God, for example, didn't spare the school children of Uvalde from a similar deadly shooter with an AR-15. So not only did everyone not see a miracle, not everyone wanted this outcome. That's kind of my point. So
that's exactly at the heart of it.
So another journalist for a publication that can remain nameless, but it's something like Rolling. The journalist says, "What is Providence to the right is a disaster for everyone else." And I just thought, wow. So you wanted Donald Trump to get killed. That's what you wanted. So there's people writing columns that actually desired him to get killed and thought that would be a great thing and didn't just see this as something evil. That's what's scary. That people would write something like that. Not only this brazen hussy that says something blasphemous, but then you've got these other people.
Yeah. I think that's just the times we're in, Paul. I mean, there used to be.
We should like celebrate that. Hey,
well, that's not the battle we're in right now.
And a fellow American didn't get murdered, but
that's not the battle.
We're gone now.
But I don't think that's the battle today. I think we're beyond that. I mean, we used to have a time, and we still do. Okay, there's still a time with. Let's just, for the sake of discussion, we can call it left and right. Okay, I'm not a real big fan of those types of labels. But let's just do that. So even with on the right, okay, lots of debate, lots of things that we don't agree with, constantly, arguing and debating and deciding what is best for this country, even within the right. That used to be sort of the argument. It used to be a lot of debate, a lot of healthy debate in this country about what we do. And that used to be the old left and right. Today we're really, even though that still exists, okay, even though, you probably get a room of, and I hate to say it, but let's just say 10 Republicans in a room, there may or may not agree on much of anything. The left now, or what's commonly referred to as the left now, they're on a totally different agenda, and it is really evil. You cannot sit there and wish death upon somebody and say you're a good person. I mean, that's just insane, especially a fellow American. So I do believe that there is hatred for the system. There's hatred for the country. There's hatred for what it stands for, how it was founded, everything about it. And I think their desire, of course, is to destroy it and destroy it in any way possible. So I think that's where we're at now, and it's a shame, but that is the fact. So when we listen to these journalists, the same ones I might add that are for gun control, right? They want to take all the guns away, but isn't it a shame that Thomas Crooks missed? He needed a gun, right? He needed a gun and better training.
Yeah.
So gun control has never been about the absence of guns. It's just who has them. And as long as they have them, it's okay. But what you're saying is absolutely correct, and that is the fact that there's I guess what I'm trying to say is there's people advocating for evil, and then there's people advocating for good, and the fact that he wasn't assassinated that day is a good thing, and I think it is a miracle. I agree with you, Paul. I think that was absolutely a miracle, and there's people that are irritated by that miracle.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think, a lot of people just say, hey, he was really lucky. They believe in chance.
I heard somebody say, and you probably heard this too, Paul, where it was staged.
Oh, yeah.
Now, let's just, let me just use my brain here for a
whack
minute.
Jobs.
Hey, Paul, I tell you what I want you to do. I want you to take a shot at my head, okay? But just hit the ear.
Yeah.
Do you know anybody with any type of, rational mind that's going to let somebody take a shot at them?
Yeah.
So
same.
for the publicity, I mean,
for the publicity nature of it. Yeah. So I think this is well beyond Trump derangement syndrome.
Oh yeah.
And so I see when these people write, they speak with words they don't understand. They don't understand what they're saying. And what I see is I've kind of looked at this and it's like, why are they saying those types of things? And I've studied this before in certain messages, and I see that unconverted people see life and they see God. They see everything through a lens of fairness. They see everything. So when you hear stuff like, well, why did God not spare the children of Uvalde and then allow Trump to get off, scot-free?
Right.
And so that is a lens of fairness. And so they see God and his ways through the lens of their own, I would say, through the lens of their own depraved nature. So they think that God owes us something. So here's the first place they're wrong.
And they're the arbiter of what
Yeah.
what that is.
So and they could just quantify, whatever God owes them. And so this, I guess what I'm trying to say is, this providence and this and everything that's happened, it will be out of the reach of our understanding. We can't really understand everything and put it all together, but we can also know that we can recognize a miracle. Now, I don't know why those children in Uvalde died. I don't have the explanation for that. I can say that was undiluted evil.
Sure.
And but the Lord did not intervene in that situation. I don't know why, but I'm content to not know why. And I can still say the Lord is good.
Absolutely.
So, but what I'm trying to get at is a biblical understanding of providence has great value. It has a lot of value. It'll get you. It's got me through the tough times, and I look at things. So, but look at also a miracle. So, I mentioned miracle, and I've talked about providence, right? So, let me just pose the question: what's the difference? How do miracles and providence interact? I thought a little bit about this. So let me offer this to you. I see that providence is God's working through his creation laws. God has a plan. He works out through his creation laws. And a miracle, I would say, is his working outside of his creation laws. So here's an example. So wine is produced from grapes. It goes through a natural process of fermentation. That's designed by God. It's controlled by God, right? And it is part of God's providence. By contrast, Jesus turned water into wine. That was outside of God's ordinary process. It was supernatural. It was a miracle. He took, normally it takes water, it takes the ground, it takes the grape, it takes fermentation, but this was just a miracle. I think the difference is God works in time and space and providence, and then a miracle is outside of time and space. Likewise, I had a bullet go through, didn't miss me by millimeters, went through my neck. And that was, I still see that as...
Well, missed some pretty critical...
It did.
parts by millimeters.
But I would say, I look at it this way too, is that bullet was waiting from eternity past for me to show up in that room. No, that's just how I see it. So likewise, I see that bullet that whizzed past and like grazed Donald Trump's ear was waiting from eternity to happen in one sense. So let me make some sense here, okay?
Yeah.
So there's in Providence you have what's called the primary cause and the secondary cause. Okay, so the primary cause is God's plan, God's creation, God's providence, and God works through secondary causes. So this is how I was able to, I think, makes the best explanation. So God is the first cause. He works through the free choices that we make, which is the second causes.
Yeah.
Okay, so they're not coordinate. One is completely subordinate to the other. So the second cause is completely subordinate to God's first cause. Okay, so God doesn't need us to do certain things in order for His will to happen, but He stands above all our free choices and still orchestrates history.
And that's where like the miracles.
Yeah, you're like, whoa, okay. Yeah. So the second cause are not independent, but instead the means by which a second cause happens is employed by God's will. So you could say this: God works through our wills, not upon our wills. Is that fair? Mm-hmm. He works through our wills, but not upon our wills. And so we have these free choices. And so that dweeb shot the former president, and that was his own doing. That sin came from him. He desired to take him out, whatever was going on in his crazy brain. But God stood above all of that and orchestrated the flight of that bullet. So that's where the miracle comes in.
Right.
And as it's done, God makes use of the second cause to accomplish what is in accordance with His eternal purpose.
Right.
So, I mean, when you look at it,
I think that's a good way to explain it.
So God is working behind the scenes, above the scenes, and He orchestrates everything. Now, how He does all that remains a mystery. Sure. But so when I look at providence, I look at miracle, it causes us to recognize that God uses everything in the universe for His glory. And exactly how He does it is beyond our understanding. I think the solution to it lies beyond the reach and understanding of our cognition. We just can't get there, and that's okay. And we're told that Isaiah 55 tells us that my thoughts are higher than your thoughts, my ways are higher than your ways.
Right.
Apostle Paul says in Romans 11 that there's a sense in which we cannot figure out what God is doing. Oh, the depths of the riches, both of the wisdom and knowledge of God. His ways are past finding out. And then God never explains to Job why he suffered. Job didn't get that.
Right.
Paul asked for the thorn in his flesh to be removed. He wasn't told why he had it. And he asked 3 times, and the Lord said, my grace is sufficient. So what I give you, and the peace for your mind, and just to know that I'm at the helm of the universe should be sufficient for you to know that. And so that's okay with me.
And God also uses a wide variety of various different types of folks, right? From the righteous to the unrighteous.
Yeah.
I think that's important to know too. So it's Pharaoh was used.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, I don't think we would call Pharaoh a godly man, but he was certainly used for God's purposes.
Yeah.
So, if you, like you were saying, if there's a providence, if there's someplace we're going, and you happen to be, chosen as an integral part of that plan, that's just what's going to happen. And maybe miracles are going to have to be, you may see miracles because that plan's getting executed, right? When somebody else comes in with their free will and tries to mess up that plan.
Yeah, that's the struggle. I mean, this idea, we struggle with a point of departure with this idea. Like, how do we grasp, But here's my point, is once I've had a few brushes with death, and I've seen my own personal experience of a butler. Right. And so I see that. And once you see it and you've experienced it, you can't say it doesn't exist.
Yeah, right.
And these godless pagans that are writing about it, which is nothing new. I mean,
but I think it's important. I'm glad we talk about it, because I think you and I are like I mean, I don't know, when you read something ridiculous, or you hear somebody talking head on TV say something ridiculous, it's immediately ridiculous. I'm not sure that everybody's there. There's some people that are actually absorbing some of this stuff and actually giving it some thought. Like there might be some credibility to some of this stuff. Just like the fact that, I mean, this has been floated around. I mean, that this was a staged event. I mean, that's wackadoo. That's just wackadoo. But but the thing about it is, Paul, I mean, people repeat it, so people are actually considering that, even though it's absurd. So
we flew our own planes into our own buildings.
I mean, you hear it all, and the fact of the matter is, the media understands that there's going to be a certain percentage of the population that's going to absorb this information and actually believe it. So because there's a guy on the TV saying it, so it's got to be true.
Yeah. So this is me for my part. I can't stand that we allow the dumbest folks to be the loudest, and they have no logic. Well, they're writing things they don't understand, and we're never going to end as long as this planet is here. We're never going to run out of these people that talk like that. But so this is just a call for us to have better arguments.
And I think it probably accounts for the meteoric rise of alternate media and alternate journalism. I mean, people have kind of looked behind the curtain now. They're like, oh, this is all nonsense. Mm-hmm. And so there's a hunger for real information and people that put out true information.
Yeah.
I think, most people are kind of getting tired of the propaganda and the nonsense, and the narrative that's being created for them.
Now, I gotta say this too. There's something inside the Christian community where people see stuff like this, providence and miracle, and they also dismiss God's intervention, which is shocking to me. I wanted to just talk about that real quick too.
Let's do that, because I think you and I also have some thoughts on this.
Yeah. So I've seen a couple of things on YouTube, where you get your news these days, right? In fact, the funny thing is sometimes on YouTube you actually get undiluted truth.
Sometimes you get some good stuff.
Yeah, instead of the spin from, the news agency. But to say that God doesn't intervene, I think dismisses, first and foremost, it dismisses prayer outright.
Yeah.
Because, now, I mean, this is a whole other topic on its own, but, through prayer, which is offering up of our needs to God, right? Is we're petitioning God to intervene, and that's exactly what we're asking for Him to meet our needs, to intervene, yes. And so the idea of providence some people can have a bad bias, and I think it damages other aspects, and it can have an impact on the practical life of the church. And I saw a video about that. A guy just dismissed outright that this was a miracle, and I just thought how sad
that's where they're at. And I think
there's a bias against miracles, and I think this is a really bad bias.
No, I think so too. But I mean, there's atheists, there's agnostics, and I got it. And there always has been.
Yeah.
So I think we have to recognize the fact that there's people that just don't believe in God, and they never are going to. Okay.
No, I'm saying these are people that believe in God.
Well,
and they
let me comment on that.
Don't believe in that.
But there's a lot of people that. I think Paul was in Athens at one time, and he was looking around Athens, and he was saying, "You have thousands of gods."
Sure.
And we have thousands of gods today. So I think what we're talking about, of course, is the one true God. There's also people that are very religious, but they have their own God, and they have their own ideas of what that God does and doesn't do, and is capable and not capable of doing. But we're trying to discuss the one true God, the creator of heaven and earth. So I think Christians, like many folks, struggle with understanding our creator, and that's natural and understandable. But I think you are correct, Paul, when you say that once you've, I like agnostics over atheists. I think they're more honest. I don't think there's anything wrong with questioning and trying to understand, but not outright dismissing. I think the person that's the atheist is really just angry and dismissive, and is not even up for any type of information or even the possibilities. It's not curious. But once that curiosity is answered, your situation, my situation, many thousands of, hundreds of thousands of millions of people out there. I mean, once that curiosity is answered, I mean, you know what you know, and it can't be denied. So we're going to hear from all those different parties.
Yeah, and here's my big thing here, right? So if prayer doesn't change things, and if prayer doesn't intervene, and God doesn't use our prayers, then you got to look differently at the whole Word of God. In Daniel chapter 9, Daniel understands that the end of the captivity is coming, and he petitions God to bring the people of God out of captivity, out of Babylon, and so prayer aligned him with the will of God, and then prayer actuated the purposes of God, and it brought about, God used the prayer of Daniel, and we see that how he sends the angel Gabriel, and how that not only he says, I'm not going to bring your people out, but I'm going to send the Messiah. And so my whole point is prayer is God's conduit by which he brings his plan to pass. And so you cannot dismiss prayer as God doesn't intervene at all. Well, so then you're just saying, well, prayer doesn't even matter. And so that someone that says that needs to read their Bible again.
Let me ask this of you, Paul, because I look at prayer as just communication. If you're in a relationship,
I like how you say communication.
Because that's what it is.
You're speaking and you're also listening.
Yes, sir.
So
my point is, I mean, you're married, I'm married. I'm in a relationship with my wife, and it wouldn't be much of a relationship if we didn't communicate.
Yeah, just a laundry list of things you need, and just send them.
Right.
Up.
So to me, prayer has always been sort of this communication, if you will, that I have with my Heavenly Father. It's just two ways, and we've talked about this a lot. We make the comments because we really don't have any other way to describe it. But God has told me, or God has shown me, I need to do this, or whatever. And we're not schizophrenic. I mean, we're not hearing voices, but that communication is kind of a part of the prayer. At least the way I understand prayer is, I'm being sort of compelled. I feel like my Father is compelling me to do something. And I think that's part of that two-way communication. So, for people who dismiss prayer, I think in essence, what I think you're saying is God doesn't exist, or you're not in a relationship with Him. Because if you're not communicating with the person that you have a relationship with, you're not in a relationship.
Yeah, no doubt, and absolutely. And just to segue off of that, I'm just saying that our prayers are somehow used by God to actuate His eternal decrees.
I agree. I mean, he cares about His children, and He's listening to us. Now, He
brings His plan to pass through these prayers. So, and again, this, we can't just look at Christianity in a wooden manner and not see that Christianity is a religion of the Spirit. And I think some people, it's just off-footing when they say that. And I really, I find their lack of faith disturbing, to use a Star Wars slogan. But so I think to say that God doesn't intervene dismisses prayer outright. It's just not good.
So there's So I think what you're saying, I think it's true. There's a lot of folks out there who are praying for Trump's success and for his protection, and
we should do that.
And we should do that. We should pray for our leaders. I'll be honest with you. I'm praying for Joe Biden, and the reason why is because
we're commanded to do that.
Well, let me just throw this out there. I mean, I think the guy's a despicable individual.
Yeah.
Now, but
I'm
here's
praying
the
the guy would bring
at,
calm heads there, and that could mean him to be brushed into retirement.
Beyond that, Paul, I'm feeling sorry for this guy
Yeah.
It's looking like elder abuse.
It is
to me.
elder abuse for some time.
I mean, I'm almost looking like this guy's a victim now.
Yeah. He's been propped up. Now, I may not have said this before, but just pulling out all the stops. I mean, he was propped up and foisted by, I would say, the cryptocracy, the people that are really running our country, and not the people. They have another agenda. They propped him up, and this guy has just been reading a teleprompter. He's listening to something in his ear, and yeah, he is a shell of who he used to be. And yeah, it is abuse. Yeah, this guy needs to go relax and live his golden life, his golden years with his kids.
Yeah.
And he is beyond any, use as a president, I think. And everybody sees that. And even the lefties, they see that too. But anyway, I think it's important to see that I'm glad we went there. Because, we don't want, Christian, don't think that prayer is not important, and don't think that prayer does not intervene with God's plan. We don't understand it, but it does. The Lord hears our prayers. He cares about our prayers. And if our country ever needed prayer, man, it's now, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And now we may never understand the interaction between miracle and providence. It's okay. And that's the idea that's kind of where I'm going is we don't understand why his name is Corey, the 50-year-old former fire chief. He died, and he died in a way that's glorious, shielding his family. Now it's terrible that happened, but what a hero! But I don't know why he was taken, and the person to this left and right was not. I don't know, and I'm okay with not knowing that. I guess that's kind of what I'm saying. It's okay because it's not my. I don't necessarily purview to know that.
At least where I'm coming from, I don't necessarily need to know the whys. Sometimes I don't think there is a why. I think it's just life. Sometimes that's just me, but I think there's just life. I think you can be in a protective covenant. You can be outside of a protective covenant. I think we saw that with Job a little bit. Where Satan has to ask permission to mess with Job, because he's not. Satan doesn't have the ability to go in there and mess with Job, and therefore that protective hedge was lifted with conditions, so that Satan could do his thing. And I think that's kind of the way life works. I think you can be in that protective covenant. You can be living outside of it. And I think if you're living outside of it, obviously, life is gonna get you. Okay, you may have good days, bad days, but you're kind of out on your own because you're doing your own thing and you're relying on your own ideas of right, wrong, and everything else outside of that protective home of your Heavenly Father. So there's that aspect. But we also know that even those individuals that are outside that protective hedge can be used by God, right?
Yeah.
Can be protected, can be part of that master plan, providence.
Sure.
So I think sometimes Christians, they seem to think that there has to be justice in every aspect of the world. That's just not the way the world works. There's good and evil, and it interacts on a daily basis. And sometimes, in times like now, I think we're starting to see a little too much evil in the world, and we're kind of wanting to tip that balance back to good, and good needs to step up in order for that to happen.
Yeah, so there's a couple of implications I wanted to bring out of this too. One is, to paraphrase Plato, the problem with withdrawing from politics is you end up being ruled by idiots. So the first implication is not only do we need to pray, but we need to vote. If there was ever a time to not stick your head in the sand and wait for the second coming, it would be now. Don't. And history is full of, it's just one example, William Wilberforce, who did not, hang back, saw the evil of slavery, worked in Parliament to abolish it in the United Kingdom. And so that's not just withdrawing from politics. He interacted with it. And there's many, many, many examples.
Sure.
And so we have to vote. We have to pray. And then the other one is this is the problem of suffering, And this is one of the thorny problems in Christianity that the world levels at Christianity. Say, well, you don't have an answer for the problem of suffering. And in some sense, we do, but then we don't. So I just quickly, I just want to tease this out.
Yeah, let's do that.
I had, now one of my favorite books is the Brothers Karamazov by Fyodor Dostoevsky. The second, this is probably my first favorite extra biblical book. And it's set in 19th century Russia. It was written by a Russian. We can forgive him for that. But this is written by a godly man. He was essentially an existentialist philosopher that teased out his existential philosophy by way of novels, if that makes any sense. Yeah. And so The Brothers Karamazov is a passionate philosophical novel, and it teases out questions of God, free will, morality, the problem of evil. And so I just wanted to share this one piece of the novel that I think speaks into this situation, okay? And so one of the great themes all the themes really follow these three brothers. Dmitri, who is a hedonist and an aesthete, to use Kierkegaard's categories. And then there's Ivan, who is a tortured intellectual, and then Alyosha, who is a monk in training. But Alyosha and Ivan are talking, and in the novel, there's this, in the interwoven plot lines, it shows the internal conflict of Ivan trying to understand suffering and why is God good and why is he all-powerful, yet suffering exists, okay? And so that kind of happens in a moment. And so Ivan confides in his brother Alyosha, and he says this, okay? Quote, "In the world's finale, at the moment of eternal harmony, something so precious will come to pass that it will suffice for all hearts, for the comforting of all resentments, for the atonement of all the crimes of humanity, of all the blood they've shed, that it will make it not only possible to forgive, but to justify all that has happened." And he says this, but in the same breath Ivan says, "But I don't accept it. I won't." And Ivan cannot accept the suffering of children. He goes off and talks about how children are abused and tortured and killed. And so according to him, adults have eaten the forbidden fruit and have brought the weight of suffering on themselves. But the children, he says, not them. He wants to know what it all means. And he says, quote, "I want to be there when everyone suddenly understands what it has all been for. All the religions of the world are built on this longing. And I'm a believer," he says, "but then there are the children. And what am I to do about them? That's a question I can't answer." And, in some sense, we don't have an answer. And towards the end of the novel, Ivan comes around and says, "It's okay that I don't know." In a sense, he says, "It's okay that I don't know." He wants to know, but we have to understand that all things happen for a purpose. We don't understand that. That's not just an old Christian platitude. It's Scripture.
And I agree.
We have to place the world in God's capable hands, which they're there already, and just know that all things happen for good to those who love the Lord and are called according to His purpose. And just say, I don't understand it, but I accept it.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I mean, this is just me rationalizing kind of what you were talking about, but it's certainly when Eden was created, that problem didn't exist. Suffering did not exist. But we were given free will, and as a result of our free will, we just don't want consequence. Nobody likes consequences.
Yeah. responsibility.
We like to make our decisions, okay, but we don't want to suffer the consequence of those decisions. It's just a human fact. We think we know best. We have this idea how things are going to turn out. They don't often turn out the way we think they are. And then there's the consequence that we have to go through. We have to realize that. But nobody wants to do that. The other thing too that comes to mind with this is,
so the world's is a fallen place.
Yes,
and we made it that way.
Yeah, I mean,
absolutely.
you can sit there and you can whine about it.
Yeah,
but it's not going to make it go away. We have a consequence that we're unfortunately
it's just sloughing off our responsibility.
Unfortunately, the most vulnerable of us suffer the most. Children, elderly, mentally ill. Those people that have a very hard time taking care of themselves are going to suffer more than the rest of us. But the other part of that is too, I also think, good is good because we have experienced evil. Pleasure is good because we've experienced pain. So I understand if you were sitting around and times are great, right? You're having a great relationship. You're very comfortable. You don't even appreciate it until you've been uncomfortable, until you've experienced pain. This is the part of us that Paul and I we talk about in Stoicism, and the fact that there's benefit to pain.
Could always get worse.
There's benefit to pain because
it can be a positive good.
Yes, because when we experience pain and suffering, how much more wonderful is happiness and comfort. We've all experienced that when we come back from deployments. Anybody that's served in the military knows this. You come back from a deployment and everything, you just love America. I mean, you start to appreciate all the things that you took for granted, right? You come out of the sandbox and you're back in your land, everything's green, everything's nice. The thermostat works. You got a beautiful home. You got a car to drive. You don't appreciate any of this stuff until you've experienced the other side of life. And so I understand that typical human argument. It's not just a Christian argument. It's a human argument. It's a human question. But I think it's a lot of it just has to do with the fact that we're just not really being real with ourselves. And when we get real, that's the reason why bad things happen and good things happen.
Yeah.
And again, and it's kind of like what we were talking about when we first started this episode, Paul, was when you start to look at Trump and you start looking at all the pain and all the evil that's being thrown at this guy, at some time or another, you got to sit there and say he's being protected.
Yeah, no doubt. So I wanted to offer this other story that I think illustrates kind of what we've been saying, kind of teases out a little bit. And I have, let's see if I can find it. If you've never heard of Richard Wurmbrand, he was a Romanian pastor. He spent 14 years in prison during the communist dictatorship of Ceausescu. His book is entitled 100 Prison Meditations, Cries of Truth from Behind the Iron Curtain. I wish that it was a Blacksmith publication. Maybe it can be one day. I don't know. Or something like that, yeah. But he writes this. He tells a story that illustrates the necessity of believing God for good when all we see is evil and frustration. Right. Okay? So he says this. A legend says that Moses once sat near a well in meditation. A wayfarer stopped to drink from the well, and when he did so, his purse fell out of his girdle into the sand. The man departed. Shortly afterward, another man passed near the well, saw the purse, and picked it up. Later, a third man stopped to assuage his thirst and went to sleep in the shadow of the well. Meanwhile, the first man had discovered that his purse was missing, and assuming that he must have lost it at the well, returned, awoke the sleeper, who, of course, knew nothing, and demanded his money back. An argument followed, And irate, the first man slew the third man. Whereupon Moses said to God, "You see, therefore men do not believe you. There is too much evil and injustice in the world. Why should the first man have lost his purse and then become a murderer? Why should the second man have gotten a purse full of gold without having worked for it? The third man, he was completely innocent. Why was he slain?" God answered, "For once and only once I will give you an explanation. I cannot do it every time. The first man was a thief's son. The purse contained money stolen by his father from the father of the second man, who, finding the purse, only found what was his due. The third man was a murderer whose crime had never been revealed, and who received from the first the punishment he deserved. In the future, believe that there's a sense in God's righteous transactions, even when you don't understand it," says Vermbrand. And so I
kind
think,
of like karma.
yeah, it is. It's a a divine type of outworking of that. Yeah, I think that could make some sense.
I think so too.
We're
not getting the whole picture.
Yeah,
our little sliver, our little snapshot isn't exposing, the entire story.
Yeah, and again, that doesn't explain the death of the innocent children.
No.
And that is, I think, I'm with Ivan. I do believe, but unlike Ivan, I do accept it.
Right.
And it's okay. It's okay for me not to be able to comprehend things
Absolutely.
as God does. And so I would say there is a lot of peace we have in the doctrine of providence. And so I would submit to you that is something that you want to mull over, right? You want to wrap your brain around that. Look at some of those scriptures. And I would just leave you with this. So in 2 Corinthians chapter 12, Paul just lists how he has suffered probably more than any other man for the gospel. And he did have a thorn in the flesh. I'm not sure what that was. We're not told. It could have been related to him getting blinded on the road to Damascus, and he had eye trouble. And so he wrote that the Galatians would have rightly given their eyes to him because I think he had eye issues, and that may have been the problem. But the unnamed affliction aside, he was told, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness." And so my point is, Paul's not given an explanation for his suffering. He's not given an explanation. Neither was Job, neither was all of the saints.
Right.
And they're okay to just say, God's grace is enough. And I'm told what I'm needing to know to go forward and nothing more. And that's, if we're given all the answers, where would the faith be?
Right.
And so that's why we have to be okay with not having all the answers. We need to answer our detractors and the blasphemous hussies. Sorry, it just fits that say these things. But we need to remember that God's works of providence are his most holy, wise, powerful, preserving, and governing all his creatures and his actions and their actions. And God works everything for his glory and for the good of the church. Right. And so it's okay. We don't have all the answers, and that's fine. I'm not God. He is. He's on the throne, and I'm just a servant. So,
amen.
Amen.
Wrap it up. We hope you enjoyed today's episode of the Pinelander Podcast. If you enjoy our unique content, please consider supporting our sponsors. Soft News provides special operations news from around the world. It's where Paul and I go to keep abreast of what's going on within the SOF community. Check them out at sof.news. American Partisan. It's the vanguard movement of Western civilization. Be sure to check them out at americanpartisan.org. And, of course, Blacksmith Publishing. We've been serving the Warrior class since 2013. They have great titles written for warriors, by warriors. If you're looking for excellent reference material or just want to enjoy a great novel, be sure to check out the bookstore. Or if you enjoy hanging out with warriors, come spend some time with us in the G-Base over at the Pinelander Podcast. All that's at blacksmithpublishing.com. Until our next meeting, stay mentally and tactically smart, physically and spiritually strong, and socially astute. To each other we pledge our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. May God continue to bless Pineland.